My name is Alara Vance, and for most of my 26 years, I have believed in the quiet rhythm of life, the gentle unfolding of one day into the next. I grew up in Port Blossom, a city that breathes with the tide, where the morning fog rolls in to soften the edges of the world and the scent of salt and roses hangs in the air. My father, Arthur Vance, built his life here, starting with a single fishing boat and growing it into Vance Maritime Logistics, a company that became the steady heartbeat of our small family. After my mother passed when I was a child, he raised me with a quiet, unwavering love, teaching me to find strength not in noise, but in stillness, not in confrontation, but in resolve. I've always preferred the company of books to crowds, the solace of my small apartment overlooking the harbor to the clamor of the city center. I thought my life with Leo was a part of that gentle rhythm, a melody I had come to know by heart. I never expected my 20th birthday dinner would be the discordant note that shattered the entire composition. We were at the Gilded Compass, a restaurant perched on the edge of the pier, its wide windows looking out onto the dark, shimmering water. Leo had chosen it. It was all polished brass and dark wood, a place that felt more like him, aspirational and gleaming on the surface, than me. But I didn't mind. I was simply grateful he'd remembered my birthday this year, a detail that had slipped his mind the year before. My dearest friends, Chloe and Maya, sat with us, their laughter a familiar comfort against the low hum of dinner conversation and the distant cry of gulls. Everything felt deceptively normal at first. We ordered a bottle of crisp white wine, shared a platter of oysters, and toasted to another year. Leo was the picture of the devoted partner, his arm draped easily over the back of my chair, his smile quick and charming. But a subtle, anxious energy radiated from him. He kept checking his phone, his thumb swiping in secret under the tablecloth. And then there were the trips to the restroom, one every 15 minutes, his excuses growing thinner each time. During his third absence, I saw Chloe's expression shift as she scrolled through her phone. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of sharp, sudden confusion. She nudged Maya, tilting the screen toward her. I watched as Maya's face went still, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly. They both looked up, caught, like startled deer. "What is it?" I asked, a small knot tightening in my stomach. "Oh, it's nothing," Chloe said, her voice a little too bright. She quickly locked her phone and set it face down on the table. "Just some ridiculous drama on one of my forums. You know how it is." Maya nodded in agreement, but she wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on refolding her napkin into a perfect, useless square. The air between us had grown thick with unspoken words. Leo returned, smiling his easy smile, and pressed a cool kiss to my cheek. "What's with the serious faces? Deciding if you have room for dessert?" I forced a smile back. "Something like that." "Get whatever you want, Alara," he said, his voice warm and expansive. "It's your special day, my love." Throughout the rest of the meal, he amplified his affection, as if to compensate for his earlier distraction. He pulled me close for selfies, which he posted instantly to his Instagram stories, captioning them with "birthday girl" and "my whole world," punctuated by a constellation of glittering heart emojis. He held my hand across the table, his thumb stroking my knuckles, and I tried to let the familiar gesture soothe the disquiet in my soul. But I couldn't shake the image of Chloe's face, or the way Leo's charm now felt like a performance, a brightly lit stage designed to distract from what was happening in the shadows. On the drive back to his apartment, my mind replayed the last few months. His distance, which I'd attributed to stress. His constant attachment to his phone, which I'd excused as work. The last-minute canceled plans, which I'd accepted with a patient sigh. When his father had lost his pension last year, their family had fallen into financial hardship. I was the one who had persuaded my own father to give Leo a position at the company, a well-paying office job he wasn't entirely qualified for. I'd done it because I believed Leo's happiness was intertwined with my own. My father, who saw the world in ledgers of loyalty and hard work, had agreed because he trusted my judgment. For the past year, he had even quietly subsidized Leo's rent on the apartment he was living in, a property my father owned downtown. When we arrived, Leo unlocked the door and gestured me inside. I have one more surprise for you, he said, his voice laced with a strange, eager tension. A profound weariness settled over me. The performance of the evening had drained me. I'm really tired, Leo. Can it wait until the morning? His face fell, annoyance flickering in his eyes before he smoothed it over. I went to a lot of effort for you, Alara, he said, a note of wounded pride in his tone. For your birthday. He made it sound like an accusation, as if my fatigue was a form of ingratitude. I relented, but the surprise was just a hastily purchased, overpriced cheesecake and a clumsy, obligatory intimacy that left me feeling colder than before. I waited until the sound of his breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep. The moonlight slanted through the bedroom window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the still air. I looked at his peaceful, sleeping face, a face I thought I knew better than my own, and felt a chasm open between us. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I opened my messages to Chloe. Show me what you saw. The 3 dots of her reply appeared and disappeared, a frantic, hesitant pulse. Finally, a message came through. Are you sure? It's really bad, Alara. I'm sure. Just send it. The link arrived a moment later. It felt heavy, freighted with a significance I couldn't yet comprehend. I tapped it, and my world tilted on its axis. It was a social media profile, on a platform he'd always claimed was for kids and utterly brainless. The account name was The Real Take Leo, and it was undeniably him. The profile picture was a cocky selfie I didn't recognize. And there it was. A video series titled, Rating My Girlfriend's Circle. There were 6 clips in total. The most recent thumbnail was a picture of me, taken on my birthday just hours ago, a big, garish red X drawn over my smiling face. My heart began to beat a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I pressed play. Leo's voice, filtered through the phone's tinny speaker, was jovial and cruel. And finally, the main event. This is my girlfriend, Alara, he began, as footage from our beach trip last summer filled the screen. Yes, I know. I'm suffering for the cause. She's a sweet girl, but let's be honest, she's a soft 4. Delusional, thinks I'm actually in love with her. I'm only with her because her dad pays my salary and my rent. Just look at this. The video cut to a candid shot he'd taken of me emerging from the water. I remembered that day so clearly. I'd been so insecure about wearing a 2-piece swimsuit, and he had wrapped me in a towel, kissed my forehead, and told me I was the most beautiful woman on the beach. He'd encouraged me to smile for a photo, telling me how proud he was that I was embracing my body. He had used that exact moment, that fragile, hard-won piece of confidence, to humiliate me for an audience of strangers. The comments were a fresh wave of horror. Hundreds of them. His friends, people I'd had dinner with, were laughing. One wrote, "Bro, when are you gonna leave that land whale?" Leo had replied with a string of laughing emojis and hearted the comment. Another said, "Taking one for the team. What a legend." His reply, "The things I do for a steady paycheck." The video had over 50,000 views. 50,000 people had watched him tear me apart, piece by piece, for sport. I felt a cold, hollowing nausea wash over me. I looked at the man sleeping beside me, the man who had whispered, "I love you," before turning out the light. The man who had woven himself into the fabric of my life for 3 years, making me believe I was cherished. The man who had taken my family's kindness, my father's generosity, and repaid it with public scorn for a few dozen likes and a handful of pathetic clout. A chilling calm descended. I picked up his phone, my fingers surprisingly steady as I used his thumbprint to unlock it. I found everything. The group chats with his friends, filled with running jokes about my weight, my quiet nature, even the way I sometimes stumbled over my words when I was nervous. The dating apps, his profiles full of pictures I had taken of him, describing himself as trapped in a dead-end relationship and looking for an escape. He lived in an apartment my father owned. He drove a car my father had co-signed for. He had a job he only held because of my father's misplaced faith in me. And all the while, he was curating a secret online life built on my degradation. The bitter irony was that I was the one who had championed him, who had vouched for his character, who had convinced my father to extend a helping hand. I could have woken him up. I could have screamed, my voice raw with pain and fury. I could have thrown his phone at his beautiful, lying face. But something held me back. A quiet, cold certainty settled in my bones. A confrontation would solve nothing. He would deny it, call it a joke, twist it around until I was the one who was overreacting, who was violating his privacy. He might lose me, but the videos made it painfully clear he didn't want me anyway. The only thing he truly valued, the only thing he would feel the loss of, was my father's money. And I realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, that I would not just walk away. I would not just let him move on to his next victim, his life uninterrupted. What he had done was not just a betrayal of me, it was a calculated desecration of my family's trust. It demanded more than tears. It demanded consequences. The next morning, I woke before him. I went into the kitchen and made coffee, the aroma filling the quiet apartment. I made him toast, just the way he liked it, with a thin layer of almond butter. When he came into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, I smiled and handed him a mug. "Morning, sleepyhead," I said, my voice even and light. He kissed me, a casual, proprietary gesture. "Morning, beautiful. Thanks for breakfast." I watched him eat, my heart a frozen stone in my chest. When he left for work, I kissed him goodbye at the door, a Judas kiss in reverse. Then I closed the door, leaned my forehead against the cool wood, and took a deep, shuddering breath. I called Chloe and Maya. I saw it all, I told them, my voice barely a whisper. And I'm not just going to cry. I'm not just going to break up with him. A new, unfamiliar hardness was forming within me, like ice crystallizing in water. What he did, it deserves a response. A quiet, deliberate, and thorough response. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to dismantle. For the next 3 days, I became an archivist of my own heartbreak. The world outside, with its gentle sea breeze and blooming gardens, seemed to fade into a muted backdrop. My focus narrowed to the blue-lit screen of my laptop. Leo's digital footprint was a sprawling map of deceit. The real Take Leo was just the beginning. He had other accounts, other personas, all variations on the same theme, the tragic hero, trapped by the generosity of his girlfriend's family. He posted side-by-side comparisons of my vacation photos with those of fitness influencers. He wrote long, rambling posts about feeling suffocated, about dreaming of a life where he wasn't babysitting someone for a paycheck. Chloe and Maya became my silent partners in this grim excavation. They came to my apartment after work, bringing takeout containers of pad thai and quiet, unwavering support. We sat around my small kitchen table, the air thick with the hum of the refrigerator and the clicking of keyboards. We downloaded every video, screenshotted every comment, and compiled every hateful message from his group chats. They had nicknames for me, the benefactor, the meal ticket. They joked about my father, calling him the Bank of Arthur. Reading their words felt like swallowing shards of glass, but with each piece of evidence we saved, my resolve hardened. My father has always been my anchor. A single dad raising an only daughter, he had wrapped me in a protective love that was as vast and deep as the ocean his business navigated. When I first brought Leo home, I saw the skepticism in Dad's eyes. He was a man who judged character by the firmness of a handshake and the directness of a gaze, and Leo was all polished charm and deflecting smiles. But he saw how Leo seemed to make me happy, how I lit up around him, and so he had softened. He had trusted my judgment. And I had led him to trust a man who was laughing at us both. I called him and asked to meet for lunch, just the two of us. We met at the Salty Dog, a rustic pub on the wharf that smelled of fried fish and old wood, a place he'd been going to for 30 years. I saw the concern on his face the moment I sat down. I had intended to be calm, to lay out the facts as methodically as we had compiled them. But when he looked at me, his eyes full of that familiar, unconditional love, the carefully constructed dam inside me broke. I slid my phone across the table, the screen open to the first video. "You need to see this, Dad." I watched his face as he scrolled. It was like watching a slow, terrible sunrise of rage. His weathered, kind features tightened, his jaw setting into a hard line I'd only seen a few times in my life, usually when a competitor had tried to undercut him. He said nothing for a long time, just methodically absorbing the poison, his thumb moving from one screenshot to the next. The silence in our booth was a living thing, heavy and cold. Finally, he set the phone down, his hand resting beside it. He looked at me, his eyes clear and sharp. "Are you all right, Alara?" "No," I said, the word raw and honest. "But I will be. I'm not going to let him get away with this." He nodded slowly, a deep, thoughtful motion. "We won't let him," he said, his voice quiet but resonant with absolute authority. "We'll handle this, sweetheart. Together. You tell me what you need." My father hadn't just built a business, he had navigated storms, both literal and figurative. He understood that the most effective response is not always the loudest. He knew how to untie knots and how to cut ropes. And Leo had just become a rope that needed cutting. We made a plan. Not a plan of vengeance, but a plan of disentanglement. A careful, strategic removal of every support beam my family had put in place under his life. The first step was quiet and professional. The following Monday, my father called Leo into his office. He was being transferred. There was a corporate restructuring, Dad explained, and his skills were needed at the shipping depot across the industrial canal. It meant a longer commute, grueling early morning hours, and a significant pay cut due to the reevaluation of the position's responsibilities. When Leo tried to protest, to leverage his relationship with me, my father remained impassive. "It was a business decision," he said. "Nothing personal." The second step was the apartment. My father's lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, reviewed the lease Leo had signed. It was riddled with violations. There was the unauthorized roommate. His friend Vincent had been living in the second bedroom for 6 months, a fact Leo had conveniently omitted. There was the property damage, scuffs on the hardwood floors, a series of holes in the drywall hidden behind a poster. And there was the pet, a bearded dragon he kept in a glass tank, in direct violation of the strict no pets clause. We didn't move to evict him. Not yet. That would be too direct, too obvious a link to me. Instead, the property management company sent a formal notice. The building was scheduled for a series of routine but mandatory inspections and maintenance upgrades over the next 2 weeks. They would require access to his unit, sometimes with very little notice. Leo prized his privacy and his space. I knew the constant, unpredictable intrusions would feel like a siege. The third step was the car. Ms. Albright discovered he had missed 2 consecutive payments on his loan, something he'd hidden from me by making cash excuses. This default gave the bank the right to call in the loan, demanding the full remaining balance immediately. It was a sum he absolutely did not have. He would have to turn to my father for a bailout, a request we knew was coming, and one we were prepared to deny. All of this was set in motion within a week of my birthday. To Leo, I remained the loving, oblivious girlfriend. I listened with feigned sympathy as he complained about the transfer, about how he didn't understand why my father would move him from a comfortable office to a dusty warehouse. "Maybe he sees potential in you, Leo," I said, my voice soft and encouraging as we sat on his couch one evening. "Maybe this is an opportunity to learn the business from the ground up, to prove yourself." He nodded, wanting to believe it, wanting to believe my father was still invested in his future. He seethed about the maintenance workers. "They just show up, Alara. They were here at 8 a.m. this morning, going through everything." "Well, the lease does say they have the right to enter for repairs," I said lightly, looking up from my book. "Maybe you should just make sure things are tidy. You know, so they don't get the wrong impression. You probably should have found a new home for that lizard of yours anyway, remember?" The look on his face, a flash of pure, unadulterated panic, was more satisfying than any argument could ever have been. He had no idea how I knew. He panicked about the letter from the bank. He paced the small living room, running his hands through his hair. "They can't do this. Can you talk to your dad? Ask him if he can help, just this once." I looked at him, my expression a careful mask of concern. "I can try, honey. But you know he's been so stressed with the business lately. I'll see what I can do." I left him hanging on that fragile thread of hope, and then I changed the subject. Chloe and Maya were my daily check-ins, my anchors to sanity. They worried I would break, that the strain of the deception would become too much. But I found a strange, cold strength in the charade. Watching Leo's carefully constructed world begin to tremble and crack was a grim but necessary vindication. It wasn't about pleasure, it was about balance. The scales had been tipped for too long. By the end of the second week, he was a wreck. He was exhausted from the physical labor at the depot, paranoid about the apartment inspections, and terrified about losing his car. His charming facade began to slip. He was irritable, snapping at me over small things, only to catch himself and smother me with apologies, his eyes reminding me, and himself, that he needed to keep me on his side. That was when we moved to the next phase of the plan. One afternoon when he was due to come over, I left my laptop open on the coffee table. The screen showed a carefully fabricated email exchange between me and my father. The subject line read, Revisions to the Vance Trust and Will. The body of the email mentioned my father's intention to make me the future CEO of the company and a significant trust fund that would become accessible to me on my 30th birthday. It was all fiction, a piece of digital theater crafted by my father and Ms. Albright. That evening, Leo was a different man. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a focused, cloying attentiveness. He gave me a shoulder massage, made me dinner, and told me how he'd always known I had the mind for business, how proud he was of the future I was building. I smiled and thanked him, my mind a silent observer, watching the gears of his greed turn. The next day, I delivered my own masterstroke. I've been thinking, I said, as we washed the dishes. I think we should move in together. A real place, just for us. No help from my dad. A fresh start. I saw the panic flash in his eyes again. He started making excuses. The timing was bad. His job was unstable. He had no savings. I let my face fall, my voice trembling slightly. Don't you want a future with me, Leo? He backpedaled so hard he nearly stumbled. Of course I do. Of course. Moving in together would be amazing. Then a hopeful look dawned on his face. But, instead of spending money on a new place, what about that luxury condo downtown your dad just finished renovating? It's just sitting empty. It would be so much smarter financially. I pretended to consider it. I'll think about it, I said, and watched the relief wash over him as he believed he had masterfully steered the conversation back to his advantage. He had no idea that while he was at the depot hauling crates, Chloe and Maya had been helping me quietly move my life out of his apartment. Every book, every piece of clothing, every photograph, even the expensive espresso machine I'd bought him for Christmas that he never used, confessing in one of his videos that he secretly hated coffee. I was systematically erasing myself from his space, becoming a ghost in the life he thought he still controlled. The job transfer had another benefit. It isolated him. His work friends, the ones who cheered on his cruelty online, were miles away in the corporate office. My father got reports from the depot supervisor. Leo was an outcast. The other workers, hard-working men who had been with the company for years, saw him as a spoiled brat, the boss's daughter's boyfriend, and they kept their distance, suspecting he was a spy for management. His car situation finally came to a head. The bank sent a final notice of repossession. Desperate, he bypassed me and went straight to my father, showing up at the VML headquarters unannounced. My dad played his part to perfection. He listened with a pained, sympathetic expression as Leo spun a tale of financial hardship, of his deep and abiding love for me, of his embarrassment at having to ask for help yet again. Dad let the silence hang in the air for a long moment after Leo finished. Then he leaned forward, his expression serious and fatherly. "Son," he said, the word a masterpiece of condescension. "If you truly love my daughter, if you're truly committed to building a life with her, then prove it. Make it official. Propose to her. A man who is committed to my daughter is a man I am willing to invest in." Leo came to my apartment that night, his face aglow with a triumphant, manic energy. He told me he'd had a wonderful, man-to-man talk with my father, who had given him some profound advice. When I asked what it was, he just smiled. "I don't want to ruin the surprise." Then he pulled up a jewelry website on his phone. "Hypothetically," he said, "what kind of ring would you like?" I played along, my heart beating a slow, steady, funereal rhythm. I pointed to a simple, elegant design, pretending to be swept up in the fantasy. He was going to propose. Not out of love, but as a business transaction. He believed a ring on my finger was the key to unlocking my father's bank account. The next day, he asked me to dinner. "Let's go back to the Gilded Compass," he said. "I want to make up for being so distracted on your birthday." I agreed, my voice sweet and steady. The stage was set. I called Chloe and Maya. "It's happening," I told them. "He's going to propose." There was a moment of furious, protective outrage on their end, but I calmed them. "It's okay," I said, and for the first time, I truly believed it. "I have it all under control." The day of the planned proposal felt surreal, like walking through a dream I was directing. I spent the afternoon in quiet preparation, but it was not the fluttering, hopeful ritual of a woman about to be engaged. It was the calm, deliberate arming of a soldier before battle. I did my hair, letting it fall in soft waves over my shoulders. I did my makeup with meticulous care, not to hide, but to accentuate, to create a mask of serene confidence. I chose to wear a deep crimson dress, a dress Leo had once offhandedly commented made me look almost as striking as Maya in one of his less inspired videos. Tonight, I would reclaim it. I would wear it for myself. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not a victim, but a woman on the precipice of her own liberation. Leo arrived to pick me up, his nervousness a stark contrast to my stillness. He complimented my dress, his eyes darting around my face as if searching for a sign. He kept touching the breast pocket of his jacket, where I could see the faint, telltale bulge of a small, square box. He had insisted on driving, and I now understood why. He was curating a perfect moment, a grand romantic gesture that was, in reality, a desperate, final gambit. The Gilded Compass was just as I remembered it, gleaming, impersonal, and filled with the low murmur of other people's lives. Leo was sweating, a fine sheen on his forehead despite the cool evening air. He checked his phone compulsively. He ordered champagne and launched into a rambling, pre-rehearsed speech about our journey together, our first date, a walk along the misty shoreline, a trip to the wine country I had planned, memories he now recited as if reading from a script, each one a moment he had privately mocked. As I listened, I let my mind drift. I thought of the video of me at the beach, the cruel laughter, the word creature. I thought of the group chats, the jokes about my deceased mother he'd once claimed to admire me for honoring so beautifully. I thought of the 50,000 strangers who had been invited to laugh at my expense. I held these painful truths in my mind not to fuel anger, but to anchor myself in the reality of what I had to do. The man across from me was a phantom, an illusion I had once loved. The man in the videos was the truth. Just as the waiter set down our dessert, a delicate raspberry tart, Leo's moment arrived. He took a shaky breath, his eyes locking on mine. He slid from his chair and knelt on the plush carpet, the gesture so cliched it was almost comical. He pulled the small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a ring. It was a cheap, ostentatious thing, a cluster of small, cloudy diamonds that screamed of a purchase made on a maxed-out credit card. "Elara Vance," he began, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "You are my rock, my heart, my entire world. I can't imagine a single day of my life without you. Will you make me the happiest man alive? Will you marry me?" The surrounding tables had gone quiet. A few people were smiling, their faces soft with the pleasure of witnessing what they believed was a beautiful, authentic moment. I looked at Leo's earnest, pleading face. I looked at the cheap ring. I let the silence stretch, just for a moment. Then I said the word that I had been practicing in my mind for days. The word that was not an answer, but a verdict. No. It was quiet, but it landed in the space between us with the force of a physical blow. Leo's smile froze, faltering. He let out a small, nervous laugh. "What?" "Elara, don't joke around." I looked him directly in the eye, my expression unyielding. I said it again, my voice clearer and louder this time, carrying to the nearby tables. "No." The color drained from his face, replaced by a flush of red, creeping up his neck. He scrambled to his feet, his movements clumsy with embarrassment and confusion. Can we please talk about this outside?" he hissed, leaning over the table. "No," I said for a third time, my voice ringing with a finality that could not be mistaken. "I'm perfectly comfortable having this conversation right here." Then I took out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I pulled up the video, the one with the red X over my face. I turned the volume all the way up. I pressed play. Leo's own voice filled the hushed restaurant. And finally, the main event. "This is my girlfriend, Alara." "Yes, I know. I'm suffering for the cause. I'm only with her because her dad pays my salary and my rent. Just look at this." His face went from red to a ghastly, bloodless white. He lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back, holding up a hand to stop him. "Don't you ever touch me again," I said, my voice low and cold. The restaurant erupted in a ripple of whispers. A waiter hovered nearby, uncertain of what to do. Leo's eyes were wild, darting between me, my phone, and the exit, a cornered animal calculating its escape. "You're making a scene," he seethed, his voice a venomous whisper. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Leo," I said, placing my phone face up on the table, the video still playing on a silent loop. "I'm done embarrassing myself by pretending you're a man worth loving. I know everything. Every video. Every message. Every pathetic joke you and your friends made at my expense." I leaned forward slightly. "And by the way, I've already moved out. Every single thing of mine is gone from your apartment. The meal ticket is gone. The easy ride is over." I stood up, my purse in my hand. I looked down at him, a man so diminished, so utterly exposed. "The only thing you'll be remembered for is being a coward who built his fragile ego by trying to break the one person who ever had your back." He stared at me, speechless, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. Then, with a strangled noise of pure fury and shame, he turned and fled, pushing past the concerned waiter and storming out of the restaurant, leaving me alone at the table with the bill, the half-eaten tart, and the open ring box, a monument to his greed. The aftermath began that night. My phone lit up with a furious barrage of calls and texts. They progressed from rage to desperate, pleading to veiled threats. I blocked his number. He moved to Instagram, then Snapchat, then an old university email address he must have dredged up from years ago. I blocked everything, methodically, dispassionately, as if I were simply clearing out spam. Chloe and Maya came over with a bottle of wine, ready for a victory party, but I wasn't in the mood for celebration. I felt hollowed out, purged. I took the longest, hottest shower of my life, trying to scrub the last 3 years from my skin. Then I spent hours methodically deleting every digital trace of him from my life, every photo, every saved message, every old post. It was a digital exorcism. Over the next week, the fallout grew messier. He began to appear in the periphery of my life, a ghost at the feast of my newfound freedom. He was outside my favorite coffee shop, pretending to be on a call. He was at the grocery store, feigning surprise at bumping into me in the produce aisle. He tried to speak to me, his apologies always couched in self-pity. "I'm sorry you saw those things. I'm sorry you're so upset. You know I love you. You know I can't do this without you." I never gave him the satisfaction of a response. I looked through him, walked past him, my silence a more powerful repudiation than any angry words could ever be. One evening, as Maya and I left a quiet wine bar, we saw his car idling across the street, a dark shape in the gloom. I looked at her, and without a word, I pulled out my phone and began filming, the red recording light a small, defiant beacon. I walked straight up to his driver's side window. "Are you lost?" I asked, my voice calm. He was startled, then angry. "I was just waiting for a friend," he stammered. "Leave," I said softly. "Or I'm calling the police." Maya already had her phone to her ear. He peeled out, his tires screeching against the asphalt, and disappeared into the night. Meanwhile, the legal machinery my father had set in motion continued to grind. He received the official 30-day eviction notice, citing the lease violations. The maintenance checks became more frequent, more disruptive. His secret roommate, Vincent, wanted nothing to do with the situation and moved out within a week. The car was repossessed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Chloe sent me a photo someone had snapped. Leo standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching the tow truck haul away the last symbol of his borrowed life. I saved the photo. A quiet reminder of what happens when a foundation built on lies collapses. His job was the last thing to go. My father transferred him to the graveyard shift, cleaning out shipping containers. He lasted 5 days before he stopped showing up. He tried one last, desperate gambit. A handwritten letter left with the receptionist at my office, full of pleas for one more conversation, for a chance to explain. The receptionist, a kind woman who had known me since I was a teenager visiting my dad at work, threw it in the recycling bin before I even knew it existed. A few weeks after his eviction, I got a call from the warehouse supervisor. Harrison hasn't shown up for 4 shifts. He's abandoned the job. We cleaned out his locker. You want the stuff inside? What is it? I asked. Just junk. Empty energy drink cans, some old photos of you too. Throw it all out, I said, and hung up. Then, one Monday morning, I walked to my office and saw him. He was sitting on the curb, looking thin and haggard, 3 days of stubble on his jaw. He was holding a piece of cardboard with the words, "Please forgive me," written in marker. He didn't look up as I walked past. The receptionist caught my eye as I entered the building and mouthed, "He's been here since dawn." I just shrugged. "If he tries to come inside, call security." She gave me a grim smile. "Already on standby." I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I focused on the morning's emails, on the rhythm of my work, on the life that was still mine. By lunchtime, he was gone. The sign was still there, propped against a public trash can, a pathetic piece of debris from the wreckage he had made of his life. I don't know what he will try next, but I know he will never get what he's asking for. Forgiveness is a gift, and it is a gift I no longer have to give. Some things, once broken, cannot be mended. And some people, once they show you who they are, must be believed. For a time, I believed seeing Leo on the curb with his cardboard sign would be the final scene. The pathetic, rock-bottom moment before the credits rolled on that chapter of my life. But people like Leo don't simply fade out. Their stories don't end, they just find a new, more desperate narrative. The week that followed was quiet, but it was the loaded quiet that comes after a storm, when the air is still heavy with ozone. He didn't reappear outside my office, but his presence lingered in other ways. I began to hear from people from my past, a friend from a university literature class, a distant cousin, a woman I'd worked with at a summer job 5 years ago. The messages were all variations on a theme. "Hey, just checking in. Is everything okay? I heard something happened with you and Leo." He was crowdsourcing his sympathy, painting himself as the victim to anyone who would listen. His former roommate, Vincent, sent me a long, rambling message about how Leo was in a really dark place and that maybe I could find it in my heart to meet him for 5 minutes, just to give him closure. The word closure struck me as so profoundly selfish. He wasn't seeking peace, he was seeking absolution he hadn't earned. I blocked Vincent without replying. My empathy was a resource I was no longer willing to spend on those who had stood by and watched me burn. The eviction process officially concluded. The property manager sent my father the final invoice for damages. The apartment was a disaster. Stains on the carpet, garbage left in the kitchen, and a deep, gouging scratch on the hardwood floor in the living room. My father laughed a dry, humorless laugh when he saw the bill. "Karma," he said. I agreed, but I felt nothing. The money was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was that the lock had been changed and his key no longer worked. A year later, on my 27th birthday, I found myself breathing easier. The thought of Leo no longer brought a sharp, painful pang, but a distant, dull ache, like a healed-over bone that sometimes remembers the break. I hadn't seen or heard from him in months. The flying monkeys had retreated, their messages unanswered. He had faded, not into nothingness, but into the background noise of a life I was actively, joyfully rebuilding. For my birthday, I didn't want a fancy dinner. I had my father, Chloe, and Maya over to my apartment. We ordered pizza, opened a bottle of good red wine, and sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by books and laughter. My father told an embarrassing story about my childhood attempt to sail a toy boat in the bathtub, and I laughed until tears streamed down my face, tears of genuine joy. I wore a simple blue dress that I loved, one he had never seen. I looked in the mirror before my guests arrived and saw a woman who was quieter, perhaps, but stronger. The softness was still there, but it was now protected by a newfound core of resilience. I had learned to build boundaries not of stone, but of self-respect. They were invisible but unbreachable. Every so often, a piece of his story will float back to me through the grapevine. I hear he's living with his parents, working a dead-end job, still telling a sob story about the wealthy girlfriend who ruined his life. It doesn't faze me. I am not a character in his tragedy. He is merely a footnote in my story of survival. I don't know if I will ever fully trust as openly as I did before. Perhaps some scars are meant to be a permanent part of the landscape of who we become. But I am learning to trust myself, my intuition, my strength, my capacity to heal. I have found a gentle reconciliation, not with him, but with the woman I was and the woman I am becoming. Some nights, when the fog rolls in from the harbor and wraps the city in its soft gray embrace, I think of him. I hope he remembers what he did. I hope he understands, in his quietest, most honest moments, that he didn't lose a meal ticket. He lost the one person who saw a potential in him that he himself was determined to destroy. And I hope he knows that while he may be haunted by the past, I am busy building a future he is no longer invited to be a part of.